Imagine standing at the edge of something historic, something that's never happened before, and then watching it all teeter on the edge of collapse. That's exactly where Alex Eala found herself just days before Wimbledon 2025, and the story behind what happened next is one that the tennis world genuinely wasn't ready for. This isn't a story about a player losing a match. It isn't about a routine injury update or a press conference that got a little awkward. This is about a 21-year-old from the Philippines who was carrying the weight of 115 million people on her shoulders, literally and figuratively, and what happened when that weight finally became too much to hide. Because here's the thing about Alex Eala. She didn't get to where she is by playing it safe. She didn't become the first Filipino player in history to earn a seeded position at a Grand Slam by taking breaks when things got hard. She got there by being relentless, by being fearless, by refusing to stop even when every signal her body sent her said that she probably should. And that quality, the very thing that made her extraordinary, is exactly what put her in the most complicated position of her young career. Let's go back a few weeks, because this story didn't start at Wimbledon. It started on the grass courts of Europe during a stretch of tennis that should have been a celebration but quietly became something far more worrying. Berlin was supposed to be a statement. And in many ways it was. Eala reached the semi-finals, which is a remarkable achievement for any player, let alone a 21-year-old who was rewriting history with every win. She took down world number 2 Elena Rybakina. She beat world number 8 Elena Vesnina. She was playing tennis that made you stop whatever you were doing and just watch. The kind of tennis that makes commentators run out of superlatives. But if you were watching carefully, and some people were, there were moments in Berlin that didn't quite add up. During her semi-final against Linda Noskova, something felt slightly off. Her returns weren't landing with the same authority. Her movement around the court had a hesitancy to it that wasn't there in the earlier rounds. Noskova finished with 33 winners in that match, and while that's a credit to how well Noskova played, it also reflected the fact that Eala simply wasn't operating at the level she had been earlier in the week. She still competed. She still fought. She still gave everything she had. But the electricity that had powered those earlier victories felt like it was running on a shorter wire. After the match, Eala posted on Instagram, and her words were genuine and beautiful. She talked about how full her heart was, how grateful she felt, how much Berlin meant to her. And you could feel every word of it. But what she didn't talk about was the physical state she was in when she walked off that court. And that silence, as it turned out, was carrying more information than anyone realized. Then came Bad Homburg, and if Berlin was where the question started, Bad Homburg is where they became impossible to ignore. Photographs circulated online showing Eala with heavy strapping on her shoulder. Not the kind of light precautionary tape that players sometimes wear as a preventative measure. This was substantial. This was visible from the stands. This was the kind of strapping that tells a story on its own, even without anyone saying a word. She lost to Elise Mertens in the first round, 6-3, 6-3. A scoreline that didn't reflect a close contest, and that made it more alarming, not less. Because the Eala who had dismantled 2 top 10 players in Berlin just days earlier was nowhere to be found in Bad Homburg. The contrast was stark enough that it stopped people in their tracks. Commentators who had been following her season closely started connecting the dots. She had played 11 matches in June alone. 4 grass court events back-to-back. Birmingham, then Queen's Club, then Berlin, then Bad Homburg. That is an enormous load for any professional player. For a 21-year-old whose body was still adapting to the demands of the top level, it was the kind of schedule that requires everything to go right just to stay healthy. And clearly, not everything had gone right. One former player, a genuine legend of the game, came out and said publicly what many people were thinking privately. That Eala should seriously consider taking a rest after Berlin. That sometimes recovery matters more than collecting ranking points. That showing up to a Grand Slam with a tired body is a gamble that doesn't always pay off the way you hope. It was honest advice, the kind that comes from experience, from having been in that position and knowing what it costs. But Alex Eala didn't rest. She didn't pull out of Bad Homburg. She kept playing. And when Bad Homburg ended early, she didn't step back and take stock. She kept moving forward, because that's who she is. That's the engine that drives her. And that engine was now heading toward the most important 2 weeks of her life. Wimbledon. The grass. The history. The moment she had been building toward her entire career. For the Philippines, this wasn't just a tennis tournament. It was a national event. 25,000 Filipino fans had either traveled to London or were making plans to be there. Social media in the Philippines was buzzing with a kind of excitement that crosses the line between sports enthusiasm and genuine cultural pride. Eala wasn't just a tennis player in that context. She was a symbol. She was proof of what was possible. She was the living argument that a player from Southeast Asia could walk onto the most prestigious courts in the world and belong there. And she had earned that status entirely on merit. The seeding was real. The ranking was real. The wins over top 10 players were real. None of it was a gift. All of it was the product of years of work and sacrifice and the kind of daily commitment to improvement that most people never fully see because it happens in practice courts and training sessions and quiet moments of discipline when no one is watching. So when she arrived at Wimbledon, everything should have felt like a triumph. And in one sense it did. She was making history just by being seeded. She was doing something no Filipino had ever done. But behind the scenes, something else was happening. The strapping on her shoulder hadn't gone away. The discomfort that had been visible in Berlin and Bad Homburg hadn't resolved itself with a few days of rest. And the people around her, the medical staff, the coaching team from the Rafa Nadal Academy, were watching closely and asking hard questions. Then came the meeting. The one that nobody on the outside knew about until the ripples started showing. A private meeting, behind closed doors, with Wimbledon officials. The kind of meeting that doesn't make it onto the official schedule. The kind that gets requested when something serious needs to be addressed. What exactly was said in that room is something that only the people in it can fully account for. But what followed told its own story. When Eala walked out, her team was not relaxed. Tournament officials were not relaxed. The atmosphere around her camp shifted in a way that people noticed even without knowing exactly what had been discussed. And the information that began to emerge painted a picture that the tennis world found genuinely difficult to sit with. Eala had been playing through pain. Not the kind of general discomfort that every professional athlete manages as a matter of course. Something more specific. Something that had been building over the course of those 4 grass court events. Something that the heavy strapping had been managing, or trying to manage, but not fully solving. The shoulder and elbow issues that had seemed like a story about fatigue and load management were actually pointing to something with more weight behind them. And the implications of that, for a player about to step onto center court and compete against the best players in the world, were serious. The people who loved tennis, who had been watching Eala's season with genuine joy, found themselves in a place of real anxiety. Because this wasn't just about one match or one tournament anymore. This was about the long game. This was about whether pushing through this particular moment was worth the risk to everything that came after it. And that's the conversation that Wimbledon officials, medical staff, and Eala's team were suddenly having in real time, with the clock ticking and the draw already made and 25,000 fans on their way. When the news started filtering out, the reaction in the Philippines was immediate and visceral. Social media moved fast, the way it does when something lands in the emotional center of a community. People who had been counting down the days to Eala's Wimbledon debut were suddenly switching from excitement to fear without any transition in between. The messages that flooded in were raw and real. People praying. People pleading. People expressing the kind of love for a public figure that only happens when that figure means something deeply personal to the people watching. Laban. Alex. Fight. Alex. That's what you kept seeing, over and over. Because in the Philippines, that word carries everything. It doesn't just mean fight in the physical sense. It means persist. It means refuse to give up. It means keep going even when the situation feels impossible. And it was being directed at a 21-year-old who was already doing exactly that, perhaps to a fault. Here's the part of this story that goes beyond Alex Eala specifically, because what her situation revealed was something the tennis world has been circling around for a long time without fully confronting. The professional tennis calendar is brutal. It asks players to compete across multiple surfaces, on multiple continents, across most of the calendar year. The ranking system incentivizes participation because missing tournaments means losing points, and losing points means falling in the rankings, and falling in the rankings means losing seedings and direct entry into the events that matter most. So players play. They play when their bodies tell them to rest. They play through discomfort and fatigue, and the kind of wear that accumulates invisibly until it suddenly becomes visible in a very public way. Eala's packed grass court schedule wasn't a sign of poor planning. It was a logical response to a system that rewards presence. She was seeded at Wimbledon because she had accumulated the points to earn that seeding. She had accumulated those points by playing, by winning, by showing up even when the easier choice would have been to stay home. And now that same system had brought her to the entrance of the most important 2 weeks of her career, with a shoulder wrapped in heavy tape and a meeting with officials that left everyone in crisis mode. That's not a coincidence. That's cause and effect. And the people running the sport know it, which is part of why Wimbledon officials were scrambling, because Eala's situation held up a mirror to something uncomfortable. A player shouldn't have to choose between protecting their long-term health and competing for the ranking position that earns them a place at the table. But that is, in practice, often the choice that gets made. And it gets made quietly, behind the scenes, in conversations that the public rarely hears about, until something like this happens and suddenly everyone is paying attention. Back to Eala herself. Because at the center of all of this is a person, a young woman who has worked her entire life for this moment, and who was now facing a decision that no amount of talent or determination could make easy. The medical staff from the Rafa Nadal Academy, the team that had been with her through her development as a player, were involved in those conversations. The weight of the decision was real. On one side, you had history. You had the opportunity to walk onto center court as the first Filipino seed in Grand Slam history and compete in front of a Wimbledon crowd that would have embraced every moment of it. You had 25,000 people who had reorganized their lives around being there. You had a nation that had invested its hopes and pride in this specific moment. On the other side, you had a body that was sending signals that couldn't be dismissed. You had a career that, at 21, had every reason to stretch out across many more years of major tournaments and historic moments. You had the knowledge, however uncomfortable, that Wimbledon 2025 was not going to be the last chance. That a player of Eala's ability was going to have many more opportunities if she was healthy enough to take them. That's the calculation that nobody outside her inner circle could make for her. And it's the calculation that makes this story genuinely difficult, because there's no version of it where the answer is simple. Every path forward carried its own risk and its own cost. What Alex Eala did next, and how she handled the weight of that moment, said everything about who she is as a competitor and as a person. She didn't disappear. She didn't hide. She faced it directly, the way she has faced everything in her career, with clarity and with courage. The tennis world watched. The Philippines watched. And in that watching, something became clear that sometimes gets lost in the noise of rankings and results and match statistics. Alex Eala had already won something that a scoreline can't measure. She had shown that a 21-year-old from Manila could carry the expectations of an entire nation into the most demanding environment in the sport and stand there without flinching. The shoulder would heal. The tournament would continue. The rankings would move and shift and settle in new configurations. But the moment, the specific gravity of what it meant to be the first, to earn that seeding, to have that meeting at Wimbledon with the whole world watching, that moment was already hers. Nothing that happened next could take it back. And when she stepped onto whatever court awaited her, strapped shoulder and all, the story she was telling wasn't just about tennis. It was about what happens when someone refuses to let the size of the moment be bigger than their belief in themselves. That's the story of Alex Eala at Wimbledon 2025. And honestly, it's only just beginning.